The Mishkan Project.
So shall I continue?
Go ahead.
The Mishkan Project. Several years ago, my congregation for the first time was faced with the necessity of separating the several spaces for the Jewish high holidays. To compound this separation, we had for many years been unable to assemble in a place of our own making. It is an ancient story in modern times. We were a nomadic community and a nomadic culture, a people in search of a way to create a place to rest in holy assembly. The Mishkan was proposed, a metaphor deep within our tradition. A site was chosen, an architectural scheme was developed, the technology and costs were researched. With modern state-of-the-art engineering, a tensile structure became a practical and possible solution for our tent of meeting. Almost immediately, when we evaluated our relationship to a project of this magnitude on public land, one community's need transformed into an idea for the city at large and beyond. It became an opportunity to open our tent to all religions and all cultures in the days between our holiest of days in ecumenical reconciliation, celebration, and sanctity. The Mishkan project is specific to New York, but it is an idea that is universally relevant to all great cities, each within their unique geographies, social and cultural diversities. The project is built on the principles found in the Hebrew Bible with parallels in other cultures and erected for all people.
Yeah, here we go.
The initial project was conceived for Damrish Park at Lincoln Center because of its existing site features, the location within the city, the articulated urban geometry, the natural landscaping against its empty plaza, and the various setbacks from the street. One moves from the speed of the street into the vastness of the main plaza, then between two buildings into the grove of larger trees. Here one enters a threshold of moving into increased stillness and community intimacy. The semi-enclosed forecourt is created by a perimeter tent surrounding the grove of smaller trees, becoming the final moment of transition into the sanctuary itself. The sanctuary, now spacious, ownerless, and open, once a naked plaza, is transformed by temporary risers into three-dimensional geography, sheltered by a roof of soaring weightlessness. The sequence and qualities of space experienced allows the public to move deeper and more intimately into the realm of time, emotionally far from the realm of space.
View of existing site for proposed sanctuary. Okay. Again, I don't know when this was written, so just keep that in mind.
Therefore, the Mishkan would remain separate from the concrete commercialism of the urban environment, ownerless and open, in which no one would be walled in or walled out. Like music, it would represent an idealness in time, not signifying, but simply existing, not as a single anonymous object, but as geography, public and open, an urban landscape that is uncovered deep within its center, from stone that resists the pressure of density, pulled upward away from the earth. The metaphor of the Mishkan implies beginning, and like music carries a memory space that is universal for the transformation of souls past, present, and future, soaring limitlessly through space.
Does somebody else want to take over? Go ahead, Kathy. You're muted. Kathy, you're muted. All right. Yeah, I'm not sure why she can't unmute it. All right, why don't you go a little bit more, Shelley, until we...
It is essential that a proposed site be a co-creator of a living space, carrying a physical template deep within its built urban form, from which a series of transitions can be created. We must scan our built landscape as a seers of the invisible, looking for latent resources on which to choreograph our journeys inward. It is in unearthing the mundane and the explicit in our cityscape, we discover possible starting points for the transformation of found space, with the humanizing potential for expansion and metamorphosis on public life.
All right. Yeah, okay, we're almost done. All right, I'll read a little. There we go. One might ask why a large open space such as a landscape park might not be preferable to moving deeply into a densely built, might it not be preferable to moving deeply into a densely built environment? It is the contrast of the inorganic quality of the built environment with the organic quality of human movements and mutable structures that creates a living dynamic in which the life of each enhances. Let us use the analogy of a successful theater space. It is built geography, a sloped hillside where the three-dimensional quality is essential. The relationship among its participants is triangular, audience to audience, audience to actor. The frontal layout of the 60s have failed despite their perfect straight lines. Theater is relational, face to face. The life force comes not from its architectural perfection, but from its ability to hold people in relationship to one another. And that word relationship is key because, as some of you might have heard or might be familiar, we're taking a special look at relational Judaism as a perspective for our congregation. And that essentially means, as I understand it, do we need buildings? Yes, of course we need a place to meet. Are we in a place where we can have an outdoor open space that she's proposing? I don't know. I mean, in the age of COVID, certainly worth considering if we get to build a new space. Could we have it a little bit more, outdoorsy, and kind of open and maybe even more universal? But the relational part, the part where it's a sense of connection regardless of the space, regardless of the programming, regardless of the clergy, where we're essentially saying that this Mishkan, this place of encountering God, is critical to nurturing us, to nurturing our certainly our emotional well-being, our mental health, our our social well-being. How best do we need for protection a valid consideration? Of course, yes, absolutely. Need for protection is most definitely a consideration. But essentially, her message is, how much can we use the Mishkan, right? In rethinking our modern spaces, particularly our places of worship, while, right, the other perspective is the Mishkan, of course, the main focus was animal sacrifice. It was also the place where Moses would go to commune with God. It was also the center, like European cities, where the center is the church and everything is built around it. At least a lot of them. Got it.
So I was just thinking, after we do services in a formal setting, and it's a beautiful formal setting, but then part of the services really is the kiddush that we have afterwards.
Yeah.
Which has a talk about relational aspect of Judaism. That's where we really relate, and I have always found that to be, over the years, an important part of my experience in B'nai Jeshurun. So it speaks to it in our redesign to keep such a space.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting part is in the lengthy, right, planning and all of that of the Mishkan, there's no mention of that,
Mhm.
right? And maybe it's because they had nowhere else to go. They were all hanging out in the desert.
Right.
What are you going to do? Eventually, you have to talk to each other.
Right. Right.
But yeah, and I think, taking that a step further, I think different people come to Shul for different reasons, and one of those reasons, I mean, there are people who are, who have strong faith in a very, active God, and there are people that are agnostic, and there are people that are atheists, and we're really a community of a broad perspective, but the relational aspect is certainly universal. And the more that we can kind of identify what, especially for members of the community who don't necessarily feel a part of, who don't necessarily feel like they're, I don't know, part of the clique, or whatever perspective somebody might have, where the sacrifice never needs to feed everyone, inclusive, or not necessarily. I mean, there were different sacrifices, right? I mean, there's one sacrifice which was the Ola, which was literally the entire thing was burned. Right? So clearly that one wasn't. That one was meant in some spiritual way to feed God, if you will. It was being offered to God, as well as to please God, this idea of a reach nichoach, a pleasing odor. But there were other sacrifices, especially the Korban Pesach, the Paschal lamb, which was that the main focus of it was to feed, it was communal, and it was by necessity, if nothing else, because the law was that you couldn't leave it over for the next day, and unless you had a really big appetite, most families, or certainly most individuals, couldn't eat the whole thing. And so it forced people often to engage and have whatever a Seder looked like back then, in a more communal way. There were other sacrifices that were meant to serve. Part went on the Mizbeach, and part and was burned, and part went to the Kohanim, who were the leaders. And essentially, it was a way of contributing to those who were, they weren't allowed to have their own settlement in the way that everybody else did. Instead, their main focus was supposed to be doing the service in the temple, and this was a way of others showing appreciation. So there was an element of that. I think Sukkot, where there was, actually thinking about it, the three main pilgrimage holidays, those were clearly social, where everybody was expected, at least as much as was possible, to come in and converge and have a big festival. But the sacrifices themselves, not necessarily. All right, so I think we got the idea of where she's coming from. I found another interesting one that I'm going to share. Where did it go? Please tell me I didn't lose it. Oh, here it is. All right. Which I'm exploring as our next text to consider. So let's have a look at it just for a few minutes and see if it resonates. Okay, hold on. So this is an article by Geula Tversky, and I shall dwell among them, the Mishkan as a microcosm of the human condition. Right, so the last one was kind of as a microcosm for urban spaces. as well as for shuls, right? As we saw at the end of her article, she was kind of basing it based on her congregation, which I'm not sure which one it is, whether it was B'nai Jeshurun or a different one, B'nai Jeshurun Manhattan. And this one is in terms of the human condition. All right, so 4 Torah portions are, well, I can make this a little bigger, I think. Here we go. All right. There we go. 4 Torah portions are devoted to the construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, Parshat Truma, which we just read, Tetzaveh this week, which focus on the inventory of the material required, while Parshiot, Vayakhel, and Pekudei provide a record of the task's completion, including a reckoning of the supplies used. The points of correlation between the 2 accountings both reinforce their similarities and highlight their differences, right? Because essentially it goes over the same material. First it says what you should do, and then it says how it talks about how they did it. This article presents a holistic framework for integrating the Torah's 2 presentations of the Mishkan project. The suggested framework provides a comprehensive explanation for the distinctions, utilizing them to identify the overall message and thrust of the Torah portions. I will suggest that the Torah's 2 complementary yet divergent accounts of the Mishkan construction, are inversely parallel to the 2 Genesis creation narratives. The first creation story corresponds to Vayakhel Pekudei, while the second, which is the part of the execution of the plan, and the second creation story correlates with Teruma Tetzaveh. The chiastic-like relationship between Genesis telling and retelling of humanity's creation, I forget what the word chiastic means. I know it's like an inverse or something along those lines. And the Exodus telling and retelling of the Mishkan's construction reflect the fundamental dichotomy inherent in humanity's religious experience. So just so we know who's talking here, so this is in the journal Torah Umada, which is another way for saying Torah and science, and essentially trying to combine those 2 perspectives. Gula Torsky teaches Tanakh, in other words, Hebrew Bible, basically what Judaism believes is the Bible. Thank you. Kathy just posted it up, and I'll have a look at it in a second, the chiastic. She teaches Tanakh in a variety of Jerusalem-based seminaries. Gula is also a professional artist and was awarded Israel's highest prize for the Ministry of Absorption for Excellence. Right, and so she's clearly a presence. She went to Barnard and got her master's in Bible studies from Bar-Ilan University. All right, so just have a look here, the chiastic. Chiastic structure is a literary technique in narrative, motifs, and other textual passages. An example of chiastic structure would be 2 ideas, A and B, together with variants A and B being presented as A, B, B, A. Exactly, yeah, that's, instead of it being in order, it kind of goes A, B, and then comes back B, A. All right, thank you, Kathy. The chiastic-like relationship between Genesis telling and retelling and the Mishkan's telling and retelling reflects a fundamental dichotomy inherent in humanity's religious experience. Understanding the Torah's 2 descriptions of the Mishkan's construction as part of a broader meditation on the conflicting Genesis stories of the creation of humanity creates a holistic framework for understanding their subtle differences, while pointing out the unified compositional strategy of the entire Torah. The Torah portions recounting of the mission of construction emerge as a unified exposition on the wider implication of the creation of humanity. What do you guys think? Is this sounding interesting?
Sounds overly abstract.
Okay.
I mean, anybody who uses chiastic loses me.
But you learn something actually. So
God forbid.
What about
Yeah, me.
you want to give it a shot, or what do you think? You want to ponder it word for word?
Yeah, what the heck? I mean,
All right, let me give you the link for anybody who wants to have a look at it on their own. Are you able to see the link?
yeah.
If you go into that little box on the right-hand bottom corner, it looks like a comment thingy. All right, so I'll have this ready for our next class, but I'll also have a backup just in case it stays too theoretical and people feel their eyes glazing over and their minds wandering elsewhere. So announcements. I see Sandy's with us, but a little bit busy over there under a table. Yeah, the Keruvim are we talked about them on Friday night. They're fascinating in their just in themselves, right? Those winged what do you call it? Kind of like bird-like, not statues. I don't know what you call it. What carvings that were. What's that?
Cherubs. They're like little angels, or little. Well, actually, they look like babies.
Well, but that's one perspective. In the Torah
Right.
itself, it doesn't actually say what the faces were like.
Right.
But the angels, in terms of the wings, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's more a Christian depiction, anyways.
Well, the idea of the wings is in the Torah. The idea of the face being an angel is, I think, in the Talmud.
Oh,
So,
really? Okay.
Yeah, so it's not uniquely Christian. It's not, but we have other perspectives as well. But yeah, that is the common depiction that you'll see of them. All right, so announcements.
So I am multitasking, so thank you for coming up with this. Just about services, we held in-person services yesterday, and it was a hybrid because we also had the ability to do virtual. There were some problems with people getting on, so Dan, if you could stay on afterwards just for a few minutes, so we'll work out the kinks. I think
if we can keep the same link, just so that we can have consistency, that would be good.
Right. But a few people said that they were locked out.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah. What else? Your class and of course services this Monday night. Purim, the order form should be going out this week.